Hi, I'm Danny and these are my Diecast Disasters. In this video I'm going to be restoring and customizing a Matchbox Specials Porsche 959. And this car was very kindly sent to me all the way from merry old England by my mate Rob from Matchbox Garage. So thanks heaps for that, buddy. I couldn't find a whole heap of information on these specials, but they were a larger range of cars which were released in 1984, and I think these 959s were from around 1986. They're about the same size as the Super Kings range. They seem to have plastic bases on them, perhaps produced a little bit more cheaply. So taking a look at this example off of the turntable, used to be silver at some point, but a lot of that paint is now missing, along with those tampos looking pretty tatty there. The windscreen's good. The casting is all around pretty rough. The spoiler at the rear is a little bit bent there. See, the rear boot section doesn't really line up the best. There's that plastic base, that's actually in pretty good condition. The wheels, they're a little worn, and I'm not sure if they ever had chrome on them. It definitely could look a bit tidier, so let's crack on and take it apart. There's 4 rivets to drill out. I'm using a 4mm drill here. There's one end done. I'll just flip it around and do the other end. It's just more comfortable for me to drill this way around with the camera there. And then once these were drilled out, I could take my little pick here and pry the base off. Being careful not to break it, of course. So there's the base off. It's looking pretty rusty under there. Here's the interior. And the windscreen. And the boot section there is held on by another wee rivet. So I'll just drill that out, and I'm going to take the boot and the spoiler section off there so that I can clean it up a little bit more easily. So there are our castings ready for some paint stripper. So it's off to my paint stripping shed, and I've painted them over with some paint stripper. You can see it's starting to wrinkle all the paint off, and then you can just wash it off with some water. And this is how they came out. Looks like most of the paint's gone off of those. That's a bit hard to tell because it's a similar colour to the metal anyway. So next I'll give both of the castings a clean up with the wire brush on my rotary tool, and you can see it taking off all that oxidation there and any scraps of that silver paint that's left. And here they are after burnishing with the wire brush, looking nice and shiny. So let's take a closer look at this casting here. It's actually pretty scruffy indeed. So I'll just take that rear section off there. As you can see on the front right light, There's a great big lump there. Must have just been in the mould. There's these big ugly casting lines here on the front panels as well. Just get it in focus. And there's also some big ugly casting lines on the rear there over those wheel wells. There's also other various little lumps and rough areas here and there. A couple of lumps on the bonnet. So I have to do a little bit of body work and tidy that up. I'll start out by fillering these casting lines on the front panel as they're actually countersunk a little bit. I'm just using some medium thick Starbond super glue here. I'll just spray on a little bit of accelerant to speed it up curing. Now I can head over to my Dremel, and I've got a fine sanding drum on here. First I'll sand off that lump on the front headlight. Be careful not to over sand things like this and wreck the lines of the car. And next I'll just take down the excess super glue off of these casting lines here. Then I can move on to my needle files and tidy up those front casting lines a bit better. I use a needle file again to take down the casting lines at the rear. See how bad they are. I'll definitely look a lot better with those gone. And then with the bulk of the work done with the needle files, I could move on to some sandpaper. And here is our car body after our panel work and in general good sand down all over. So with that looking a bit better, I'll move on to the boot section. See, it's got that little tab underneath the spoiler there. I don't know why that's there. This doesn't touch anything. I'll have to take that off, but first of all I'll straighten up the spoiler just using my needle nose pliers to do this. Did end up breaking though. I'll show you that in just a moment. So there we go, you can see it's broken just there on the side. And that's pretty easy. I'll just fix that up with some super glue. I gave my repair a file and a sand to tidy it up, and it was good as new. Next I was back to the sanding drum on my Dremel to take off that little tab knob sort of thing that's there under the spoiler. Then on to the needle file. It's a pretty difficult place to file. There we go, that's mostly removed. You're not going to see it anyway, but it's definitely not sticking out anymore. And then I tidied up the rest of the casting. It's generally pretty rough around the edges. And there's that looking a little bit more tidy, I think. Here it is fitted back on the car. I'm just going to use some super glue to glue that back in place. Okay, so there's the body of the car all reassembled, but there is massive big overhangs where that boot fits on there, so it fits quite terribly. So I'm going to give that a good tidy up. Just going to use my needle files to file down the boot section until it's a little bit more flush with the body of the car. Again, I'm going to try really carefully not to actually damage the lines of the car too much. Or at all, really. I don't want to damage the lines of the car at all. And then once I was happy with that, I could finish it off with some sandpaper. And here was how it came out. Again, the lines aren't perfect, but they're never going to be, but it's definitely a lot more flush than it was. So there's our car body looking a whole lot more tidy than when we started. It's just one more thing to do before I start painting it. I'm going to drill out and tap these posts. So I'm using a 1.7mm drill and a 256 tap. Okay, it is good to go. So I'll start the paint job with some grey primer. This is out of a can and it's going to let me see if I needed to do any more body work, because it'll make any rough areas really stand out. But the car was actually pretty good. I didn't have to do anything, so I could move on to my airbrush, and I gave it a couple of light coats of white primer. And personally, there's only a couple of colours I really like. The classic 959. One of them is silver, and I did my last 959 in a dark silver. And the other colour I really like is red. So of course, this little Porsche is going to be red. And the next thing I did was to paint in the details. So there were some black grills and the black door handles. Then I painted all the lights black and then silver and then transparent red and orange over the indicators and tail lights. And then to finish the car off, I've printed out some 959 license plates and some little tiny Porsche badges here. And I'm just going to cut out one of each of these, and I used some PVA glue to stick them onto the car there. And then I finished all of this with a couple of coats of gloss varnish. So with that done, I could move on to the base. Here it is, looking well rusty. So the first thing I'll do is to pop out the wheels from under this metal suspension plate. Then I took it to the sink and gave it a jolly good scrubbing with some hot soapy water. Unfortunately, the plastic spike holding that plate on was a bit brittle and it broke off. That's no worries, we can fix that. So this is it all after a clean. I then moved on to a wire brush on the metal parts and give them a good clean up. So here's the suspension plate being cleaned. And then I cleaned up the axles. Next I took some silver paint and I'm going to paint the rims on these wheels. There we go, that's looking a little bit better I think. So I've painted all of my wheel rims and I'm going to reassemble the base now. Let's plonk the axles back in there. And I'm going to use a little bit of super glue to glue the suspension plate back in. And here it is after the glue has cured and that's stuck on there well. So there's our base all reassembled and ready to go back on the car. Now I'll move on to the windscreen. So it's fairly scuffed and a bit opaque looking. And it's got that 959 on there that I don't want. So I'll start out with some 1200 grit sandpaper, just using a pick here as well to get the paint out of some of those deeper lines there, and then I gave the rest of it a going over with some 2000 grit sandpaper to get rid of the worst of the scuffing. And then I went to my Dremel and I gave it a really good polish with some plastic polish. Really did take a long time of polishing to get it nice and shiny again. But after some vigorous polishing, this is how it came out. I think that's looking pretty good. A lot better than it did when I started at least. So with that done, it just leaves us one more part. It is the interior. See, it's actually two parts. The top of the dash there comes off. And it's a little bit grubby again, a bit of rust stain on the base. It's fairly dusty, I guess that's maybe rust dust. Anyway, I gave it a good wash in some hot soapy water, and then I've given it a coat of black. It's sort of a semi-gloss, glossy black. I think it looks quite leathery. I've done the dash as well. And then I just detailed the centers of the seats there with some dark and light silver. It's a little bit hard to see, but there is definitely two shades of silver there. And there's the dash back on. So that's our interior all finished and ready to go back in the car. So here are all the parts of our Matchbox Specials Porsche 959, repainted, refurbished and ready to go back together. So I just had to reassemble it, and I used 4 little button head screws. So while I'm doing that, let's just take a moment to look back and be reminded of what we started with. Here it is, our shabby, well-worn Porsche 959, all the way from Rob at Matchbox Garage. It once was silver, but it's hard to tell where there is paint and there isn't anymore. It's worn out tampos, scruffy looking wheels, and a scuffed, opaque looking windscreen. Let's see if we can tidy it up a bit. And here it is, our finished Matchbox Specials Porsche 959 from the mid-80s. It's been torn down, tidied up and rebuilt. Hopefully you'll think looking as good as ever. So we've gotten rid of the remnants of that old silver paint job, and it's been painted a nice new bright red. It's had all that bodywork done, so there's no more unsightly casting lines and ill-fitting panels. It's been detailed inside and out, and you can see through the windscreen to the interior now. And it's also had those wheels tidied up as well. So you can let me know what you think in the comments down below. A massive thanks to Rob for sending it over. Thanks heaps, buddy. There's a few more cool cars that he sent over to me as well. It'll be coming in some future videos. Thanks heaps to my awesome Patreons for supporting the channel through Patreon. If you'd like to help out as well, check out the link in the description below. And thanks heaps to you for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you'd like to see similar stuff, remember to subscribe and click the bell, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends.